Good evening, everyone. I'm Randy Gores. I'm the Director of City Planning with the City of Tampa. We're going to go ahead and get started. There'll be a few people, I think, who will still come in as the presentation moves forward. But we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you that have tuned in at this time, I want to welcome you to the second of our virtual community meetings on the Main Street Neighborhood Commercial District Plan. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation and move us right along. Okay, so here's our agenda. We're going to give you a brief recap of what happened at the October 6th meeting and some of the things that we learned during that meeting. We want to give you a status report of what we've been doing since then and the sort of the status of the overall project. But really tonight is we want to really showcase one of our partners in the project, the students at the University of South Florida School of Architecture, who have been working on this project as part of a class project and really delving deeply into the district and generating ideas about what the district might be in the future. So tonight we get an opportunity to see some of the ideas that we might want to consider moving forward. And they're just ideas, and they're ideas from our students in the area who are not only providing us with ideas, but they're also learning how to look at a district like this and present the ideas to the community. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to see some really interesting suggestions and ideas for all of us to consider as we move forward. And then we'll talk about close with some of the next steps on where the project is going. So let's go ahead and move forward. This is a reminder of our planning team. We have representatives from the City of Tampa, a variety of different departments. We also have representatives from the Hillsborough County City Planning Commission, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Hillsborough Area Transit Authority. The school district has just recently joined us. I haven't put them on the slide, but they're now working with us as well. And of course, I mentioned the USF School of Architecture. I want to thank all of these individuals and the agencies they represent, because they're all providing a great deal of expertise and insight into the project. So before we get started, just a reminder, we are recording this event. It will be posted on our website. It probably, with the holidays coming up, it probably takes about a week to 10 days before we're able to get it posted. All of you should be on mute. You'll be able to enter questions or comments into the question box. Don't use the chat box because we aren't able to see that information, but you can enter questions and comments into the question box. There's a little bit of a quirk with the question box that we learned the last time around, that you enter a question, but the rest of the audience can't see it unless we respond to it. So we'll try to respond somehow with the questions, if anything, just to say okay, so that the audience can see the questions that are being asked. And we'll either answer the questions tonight, or we'll be able to provide answers to those questions in a follow-up. So let's talk about what happened at the October 6th community meeting. First of all, there were 64 people that attended that meeting. We introduced the Neighborhood Commercial District Planning Program. We presented the study area, which you see on this slide. We talked about what makes a great district. And then we talked about the planning approach that we use and the schedule and the timeline. I will say that we're probably about 30 days behind our original timeline. We don't think that's a big worry, because it's been mostly as a result of us talking to the community, and we think that's important. We also walked through some initial impressions of the district, showing you some images of some of the positive aspects, the historic character, and some of the challenges that the district has, to try to get an idea of where the district was at this point in time and sort of what do we need to do as a community moving forward. And if you remember, if you attended that seminar, that webinar, I should say, we asked 5 questions, and these were the 5 questions that we asked. And tonight we're going to give you a brief overview of what we heard that evening. And this was only one of the ways that we communicated with many of you. But we picked up quite a bit of information in that one meeting, all of it through the question box. And we asked you all these questions and the responses. The first being, we asked you all, what words describe your vision for the district? And what came out were really some key words of historic, family, walkable, and vibrant. Here were some of the comments that we received: a lively historic destination, preserving the history, all of it, and making it a district where people can work, play, and live. Historic feel, yet progressive in its offerings. I see a district that is family friendly and has events that promote family unity, a family friendly arts district, and so forth. So what came out of it was really family, historic, walkable, and vibrant from the comments that we received that night. We also asked if you could change one thing in the district, what would that be? We didn't get a consensus on one thing, but what came up were these 4 themes. One of them was the appearance, of making sure that we upgrade the appearance, cleaning up the area, preserving the buildings, and so forth. Improving the business climate, making it easier to start a business, making sure that Black-owned businesses are included in the renovation or the future. Making it safe and secure, creating a feeling of safety, eliminating drugs and crime, homelessness, and so forth. And then improving the retail mix, creating a mix of retail that will be supporting the residential community around it. A third question was, we focused on what is the one thing that we should not do or stop doing. And a couple of themes emerged, and one of them was related to the appearance. And there was a real strong consensus that people want action in regard to the buildings that are falling in disrepair and also the appearance of the district. There just seemed to be a feeling that the district has been neglected for a number of years, and there really is a desire to stop doing that and putting a concerted effort into improving the buildings, improving the appearance, and really correcting the mistakes in the past. There was also a theme of inclusion, making sure that all stakeholders in the community today are participating in the plan and also have an opportunity to participate in the future of the district. We receive messages of making sure we don't push anybody out of the process. The emphasis on Black-owned businesses that are there today, making sure that they're part of the economic redevelopment, and so forth. So these two themes, I should say, were very high in terms of making sure that we change the direction that has occurred in the past. Now we know that we can't do everything. You know, we're going to put together a plan that has a lot of different recommendations, but just by the nature of plans with many recommendations, we're not going to be able to do everything. So this question really gets down to the issues of, if we had to do just a few things, if there's to be a total success or success moving forward, what are the 3 things that we have to solve in order to make a major impact on a district? And one of the themes were, and we've heard this before in some of the other questions, making it safe and secure, stopping crime, eliminating drugs and loitering, add lighting, and improving security. The appearance, again, was another theme that keeps emerging, making sure that we're addressing how the buildings look, code enforcement, the aesthetics, and so forth, and then creating that positive business climate of adding, of making it, I don't want to say easy, but making it, streamline it so businesses can find a place in the district and can grow in the area as well. The last question that we had that night, we asked, what was your big idea for the district? And these were the sort of thematic areas that emerged when we looked at the responses. We don't have time to go through everything on the list, but I do have a couple examples to give you an idea of what we did here. One of them was in the arts area, of creating a historic arts district with a tourist attraction, making it a tourist attraction, creating tours to detail the rich history of the area, encouraging more murals, and helping the facades of the older buildings, having colorful buildings that look fun and inviting, giving something, some special identity to the area. Another example is the encouraging more of an entertainment theme. And entertainment can just be more of a mix of uses. For example, more locally owned businesses that create a fun, safe environment full of entertainment, from restaurants to retail to events. Someone mentioned creating a Midtown vibe, but locally owned entrepreneurs. A good mix of daytime businesses that flow into nighttime entertainment options. And then also focusing on jobs and commerce that will improve as a result, which will then create a much more pedestrian-oriented district. We have a report that has all of these suggestions from the community that I'll be able to upload to you all here in a few minutes, and you'll all be able to download it. If you don't get it tonight, you'll be able to also get it from our website. But we've received quite a bit of several ideas from all of you on what we should consider moving forward, and we wanted to let you see how those thoughts were first of all recorded, and how we're planning on using them as we move forward. Since our last meeting, we've been out talking to people. We've held focus groups where we've talked to at least 23 people. I think we've actually talked to more since the slide has been put together. But you can see we talked to a variety of different people. And one person, when you look at the slide in their backgrounds or their orientation, obviously some residents might be part of a neighborhood organization, some of them might own a business, and so forth. So we tried to not double count people. So although we have one neighborhood organization, we know we interviewed people that are actually part of a neighborhood organization as well. But we wanted to at least show you that we're trying to reach out to a variety of different perspectives to hear what the thoughts are about the district from a variety of different people and different ways of looking at it. Our focus group meetings are starting to wind down, although we still would be interested in talking to property owners. So if there are property owners listening and you own property in the district, we would be still interested in talking to you and learning what plans you have for your property and what you see as an opportunity in the future for the district. We also have a couple of surveys. We have the mapping survey, which is still active, where you can place an icon on the map and tell us what you think is an opportunity or a challenge that should be addressed. That will run probably throughout the month of December. We'll close that down, I think, in early January. And if you remember, when we started this process, we had an online survey, which we finished. We'll also upload to you all. It should show up in an email to you, the Main Street Commercial District Community Survey, which we finally compiled. There's a lot of great information in that survey. We're not presenting that tonight, but we thought we would make it available to you. And then also you'll be able to, again, if you're not able to get it tonight, you'll be able to download it from our website. These surveys and our focus group meetings and the information that I've already presented to you are forming parts of the input that we're going to bring into the plan. They're all part of the public engagement because each of them give us a different way of receiving information from you. And we see with each tool, we get to see the little bit, something different about the district, and we learn something new or something a little bit deeper maybe from each tool. The staff has also started to work on our analysis. This is what planners do. We look at a district and start doing our own technical analysis of the area. So we've already begun our land use analysis, the demographic analysis, and our economic analysis, and you can see the others are a list of suggested analyses and projects that we'll be looking at over the next 30 to 60 days to round out the rest of the plan. As we produce those analysis, we'll put them on the website, so you'll be able to see some of the summaries or at least what we're finding out Most of it's going to be used in the actual development of the plan, but whatever we can make available to you so you have it as well, we'll do that. Now, for the most part, I've been doing these meetings. I've been sort of out in front, but there's actually one person who's been behind the scenes doing most of the work. Frank Hall, he's the project manager for this project. He's been doing a great job at making sure that the meetings, focus group meetings are occurring and getting them scheduled and meeting with everybody. He's also been spending a lot of time in the district. I didn't know this, but usually lunch or someplace sometime like that. He's usually someplace in the district, just getting a sense of what it is to be in the district as a patron and as a customer as well. So I asked Frank to give us a few words of what he's seen and what he's learned. So Frank, why don't you go ahead and step in and tell us, give us your sort of perceptions or a quick report on the district.
Sure, thank you, Randy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I've had great pleasure meeting with a majority of you. There are a lot of people probably in the audience that have either met with me personally or spoken with me on the phone. And through most of our focus group meetings and site visits and conversations, we got a lot of feedback. We've gained a lot of insight, and through those conversations, we've touched on a wide range of issues and topics, most of which Randy has already touched on. As you can imagine, we've touched on several recurring themes, and it'll come as no surprise that we heard a lot about the negative impact of crime and the perceived safety concerns. But when discussing the future of the corridor, two words that we've heard a lot and continue to hear a lot are potential and pride. The members of this community are fiercely proud of its history, and it shows in the passion and enthusiasm and excitement that we've seen when we're discussing the future of the corridor. We firmly believe that there's in the potential of the corridor, as we all do, and I think that's really, really exciting to hear. Our conversations, we've touched on how the community is concerned about preserving its diversity, and as such, the residents, we feel that they're confident that any effort towards revitalization should build on the community's strong cultural identity, and we firmly agree with you there. Community members believe that proposed redevelopment should go hand in hand with preserving the corridor's historic structures, and we're on board with that as well, of course. And finally, as Randy touched on, we hear a desire that any revitalization and development efforts focus on maintaining and supporting local businesses, particularly those with ties in the community. So even though these are just a handful of topics that we hope to address in this project, and we know there are many more that deserve discussion, I hope to work with you all along this process as we continue to address some of these issues and work on building the corridor that reflects the community best. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Frank. And as I mentioned, Frank is going to be leading the effort. You're going to start seeing him much more if you haven't already. And he'll also start taking much more of a leadership role in our presentations moving forward. So feel free to reach out to Frank, share some ideas. If you have any questions, feel free to contact him, and he'll take care of whatever you need. I uploaded a couple of PDFs as handouts. Unfortunately, I don't know how you all receive them. I don't know if it comes in an email or if you get a notice. If anyone has received it, maybe you could type it into the question box to let us know that you did receive the handouts. But let's move on with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so this brings us really to the main part of our evening tonight. This is the presentation of the University of South Florida School of Architecture. So I'm going to turn it over to Taryn Sabia, who is the head of the School of Architecture, who will take us through this next part of the presentation. So Taryn?
Thanks, Randy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, everyone, and we are really excited to share with you two examples of the student work that took place this semester, and I'll also share with you a little bit about what the students worked on throughout the semester and how we got to the proposals that they're going to be showing you this evening. So I am a professor at the School of Architecture at the University of South Florida and director for its research center. So we're going to go ahead and take you through. So we're going to go ahead and walk through, and we've been really excited to work with the City of Tampa, the Planning Commission, and the MPO throughout the process, and a little bit about the overview of the work. So the work was done as a service learning project, and the students took part in this throughout the semester. So throughout the semester, we began with a site visit. And this was really exciting, especially during the pandemic, to actually have the class be able to meet in person outside. And we did a walk audit where the students made observations. They wrote down their analysis of walking the street and had a series of categories that they were looking at. They also did a mapping analysis. So they put to practice a lot of that list that you saw Randy show in terms of looking at the different elements that were within the district and the neighborhood. So not just the streets themselves, but also where those main streets lie within the neighborhood. They did a series of street diagrams, which were really an analysis of how the street room looks. And when I say street room, it's from building facade to building facade. So we look at that entire stretch and what does that space feel like? They did existing condition drawings looking at the right of way as well as extensions all the way through the building and the blocks. They reviewed the public input that the city has been gathering from everyone so far. They developed a series of design frameworks using 10 principles, and then they prioritized those, and we're going to go over them a bit, and then they developed their design proposals. So this has been a process that's taken them the past about 4 months to get through, and so we just wanted to share with you a little bit of what that process looked like for them. So I'm going to go over these principles. You're going to hear the students talk about them a lot, and they're going to share with you the priorities that they have put these principles into for looking at Main Street and Howard. So the first one, and these are not in a prioritized order. So I'm going to go through each of these, and then the students are going to help you understand how they prioritize them. But the diversity of uses, really it's that blending of commercial and residential and restaurants and what the benefits are, right? So attracting people, making the environment safer, generating external activities. Active facades, this was something that was a really key piece for us in being able to really understand how active facades can contribute to safety, the attractiveness of the district, and then influences on the perception of the overall neighborhood because of those facades. Social dimension and urban vitality. This is really how public spaces can influence, right, our perception of place and what that feels like. So looking at things like the wide accessible streets, squares, parks, sidewalks, bike paths, the positive use of space, and how that really begins to, consider the peripheries, and then guaranteeing that quality public spaces to the population that both lives in the neighborhood and also visits. The human scale. So looking at how we can really provide comfort and give people perception of safety. How do they feel it? How do they know it's there? And being able to really put that throughout the public spaces. And again, this really does show a full street room, right? Where we have the buildings really becoming part of that framing of the street and the space that exists in between it. Lighting. Lighting is another critical component, and we've heard a lot about lighting, but enhancing safety is one of the key components from lighting in the conditions to move more where there is no natural light. So we really wanted to focus on those elements, stimulating the local economy. So safe, attractive conditions foster walking and cycling, easy access for local commerce. And that's a key piece, is recognizing that we have the opportunity for local businesses to thrive and wanting to see that commerce take shape within the district. Local identity. So public spaces should be planned for small businesses that characterize the neighborhood, taking into account the social dynamics of the neighborhood, highlighting cultural specificity. So we know that places, especially like West Tampa, really do hold both history and culture. And so how do we celebrate that and bring it out through the overall design and experience of the main street? Complete streets, and this is really thinking of complete streets as shared spaces. So the complete street concept defines streets designed to ensure the safe circulation of all users, pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, public transit. And so looking at sidewalks that are in good condition, infrastructure for bicycles, street furniture and signage, transit facilities and safe intersections were all components that they looked at. Green areas, so looking for places that can contribute to air quality, to shade, to the attractiveness of being outdoors. Everything from trees, plants, and flower beds that can be used also for strategic drainage and maintenance of biodiversity throughout the street as well, even in our urban centers. And finally, social participation. And we want to ensure that the nature and use of public space will meet the community's distinct needs, reflect the demands and desires of the local population, and serve as a central element for the construction of safer, equitable public areas within the district and the street itself. So these are the things that they were working with and using as their analysis and also as they built their framework. And this is a little bit of what some of their analysis will look like, and they will show you more. But being able to apply these 10 different principles to the areas of the street and how they begin to really form. And again, just another version where we can see how those are implemented. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce two of our students who are in the class. Just because of time, we won't be showing all projects this evening, but we wanted to show you some of them, and we will make available the rest of the projects. So I'd like to introduce two of our graduate students, Amelia and Anna, who are going to walk you through their projects. And Amelia, I'm going to go ahead and turn the screen over to you. And you should be able to go ahead and share your screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Taryn. And good evening, everyone. Let me just make sure I'm sharing my screen.
It's up and we can see it.
You can see it? Okay, perfect. So I do want to start thanking you, Taryn, for that introduction, as well as for giving us the opportunity, as well as the local officials, to present this project. But more importantly, I want to thank the members of the community who have taken the time out of their day to look at these projects that we have been working on and to listen to our ideas. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll all feel a little bit more inspired and hopeful of all the changes that are possible and the renovations that can be seen in the beautiful community that is West Tampa. So over the past few weeks that we've been working in this area, that we've been reading about its history, we've talked to their people, we've visited the local businesses, we've walked around the streets. It so quickly became an important place for us. It quickly gained so much respect, and the amount of value that we find in this community is immense. And I really hope that our projects tonight showcase that, and that it honors the wonderful community and the diverse community that West Tampa is. Revitalizing West Tampa for us is about exploiting the potential that it has to offer. There's already so much here. There's already so much diversity in its population and its type of businesses. It has so much success in terms of the mix of uses, the walkability of streets, and it's just a matter of focusing that energy and trying to make these places more livable and more sustainable for the community and for those who visit. Many cities around the United States and around the world are thinking about the way that we look at the street and thinking about all the benefits that these can offer to the community, such as access to job, commerce, activities, and amenities in the neighborhood. So improving the streets and improving those public spaces will in turn improve the livelihood of the community and those who live in it. So during our presentation, we're going to talk about how you can go from this image on the left, which is a current vision of the street, to what's on the right, with more greenery, with more inclusiveness to the pedestrians, with more occupying of the public space. So Taryn explained a little bit the process that we went through, but I'm going to go in depth a little bit more and showcase some of the examples of these projects. So as she mentioned, the first step was site and district analysis. So we went through a few site visits, and with us, we did an audit of the walkability of the place. We photographed, we talked to people, we visited businesses. And through this audit, we looked at different elements of walkability, of the uses of the buildings, their condition, the types, and the relationships that exist within the public spaces, as well as how those zones are defined through different architectural and urban elements. So overall, our impression of West Tampa was unanimously that there is so much potential here and that there's so much to work with, and it's a perfect recipe for success. So we are extremely excited to develop this street, and that was across the board throughout the students. However, there's a lot of room for improvement as well through infrastructure and through creative solutions that we were able to offer. Some of the elements that we focused the most on were different principles of walkability, which address where cars should be versus where people should be. They address the safety, comfort, entertainment, and purpose of a walk. So the main reasons why people walk and why we want people to walk, for some urbanists, divides in 4 main points. First, having a reason to walk. And Main Street and Howard have hundreds of reasons why people will want to walk. Businesses, residences, and entertainment are just to name a few. A safe walk. People that do not feel safe are not going to walk. And that is definitely something that can be improved through improvements in infrastructure, as well as that perceived safety that has been talked about already. Those elements that can make the visitors feel safer, as well as the local, not only in relationship to crime, but also in relationship to cars. A comfortable walk, which talks about the condition of the sidewalk as well as shading. And again, this is something that can be worked on. I thought it was interesting that one of the points that the community talked about was stop planting trees that you're not going to maintain. And so how can we propose solutions to plant trees that can thrive, that are well created so that they provide shade and they beautify the environment as well? So all of these elements were things that we're starting to note and write about as we walked through the town. And the last one is an interesting walk. People want to walk places that are just interesting and wander around. And we saw a lot of potential in these, particularly in the alleyways, in the empty lots. And so hopefully some of our ideas talk about how to address these and how to make them something interesting and something that provides a positive element to the walk, instead of becoming a place for crime or a place for people to feel unsafe. We looked at the building types, which obviously have a great value through their historic buildings, and we want to look into the elements that these historic buildings have in order to be able to integrate them into what we're doing after. We also looked at the different types of uses within, the businesses that exist, and the paths and places that are already there. All of these have so much positive to them. However, there's still the challenges that we have to address, such as problems with water, with trash, and so on. And finally, we looked at the different relationships within the public realm, such as that of pedestrians with vehicles, and how it seems almost as if the vehicles are being prioritized over the pedestrians. How the great synergy between residential and retail, and how bringing more residents to the area will in turn improve the businesses. And visitors and locals. So one of our main goals is to make sure that the community of Tampa, of West Tampa, feels pride, feels love, and stays there, and that we encourage those businesses, that we encourage people to stay there, to work there, to live there. And that will bring visitors, but it'll still belong to the people of West Tampa. Some of the other great elements that are already in place are human scale. This is not something that we see in other neighborhoods around Tampa. It has character that comes from its historic elements and the way the buildings are, and it has a lot of space for nature and recreation, as well as wonderful public spaces. So the second step, as Taryn was mentioning, was we were observing these and taking them into account and starting to diagram different elements such as the active facades, lighting, and we were looking at the different connectivity issues, places for improvement, weaknesses, and strengths. So for instance, when we look at this example, it highlights the active facades, the relationship to pedestrians versus maybe the lack of on-street parking or just parking in general. The next step was doing a context analysis. So this represented making maps and gathering multiple layers of information, but taking it a step further by overlaying them and understanding how they relate to one another. So for example, this connectivity map looks at the different bus routes as well as traffic and the pedestrian possibilities. And so by knowing this information, we are able to develop a more successful connectivity approach to the area. This is another interesting one, which is a map that looks at the space in between the buildings. So it looks at the empty lots, it looks at the alleyways, and it highlights the opportunity to use these elements as something positive for the community. Historic buildings, types of trees, the tree canopy, the demographics of the population, zoning and walkability. And at the end of the day, what really mattered to us was the input for the community. So that within that gathering of information was understanding what are the priorities and the needs of the community. In terms of priorities, the top 4 from what we understand is improving the economic development, infrastructure priorities, public space, and preservation of historic buildings. And the needs that are to be addressed is the different conditions and how this can be improved, such as crime, unsafe conditions, medical services, and government-owned properties, and so on. The next step to really fully understand how the street room works was looking at it in section and in plan and understanding what's the relationship of open space versus closed space, private and public. And so looking at the dimensions, these are really helpful to see the dimensions of a sidewalk, for example, and understand how much of it can be occupied for the pedestrian versus how much is devoted to cars and to parking. We have a few examples of these cutting throughout the whole district. And understanding the relationship of scale vertically versus horizontally, the scale of the street versus the height of the buildings is something that's important in order to maintain that human scale. And finally, we looked at the vision and the framework, and Taryn broke it down, but then we started to prioritize to what was more important for us. And so this is in my particular case, the way that I prioritized it. But I do want to note the fact that all of these are interrelated. So for example, when we're looking at crime, by improving the local economy, we are having more active facades. By having more active facades, there's more eyes on the street, which means people are looking, which means it's less likely to commit a crime. Similarly with lighting, if there's more lighting, there's less likelihood to commit a crime. So they kind of all relate to one another, but we did want to put them in order and so that we could understand them better. Now we're going to look at a few project examples, and I'm going to allow Anna Cheng to start off showing us her project. So Anna, I can change the slides for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Amelia, for this wonderful introduction. Good evening. My name is Anna Cheng, and as Amelia and Taryn previously stated, I'll be presenting a proposed vision and framework for Main Street and North Howard Avenue. And we can go to the next slide, Amelia.
Next one.
Yeah. Thank you. So first, I'd like to touch on 3 principles I have prioritized for this proposal that I believe apply both to Main Street and North Howard. So the first one being active facades on both streets, which is a great principle to think about because currently the existing conditions show that the relationship between the ground level, the sidewalk, and the street are accommodating the car rather than the pedestrian. And this, along with unused parking spaces, disrupts the rhythm and activity of the block and the facades. And so we saw a lot of that through the presentation that Amelia made. And important factors that would revitalize the programming and activity of the blocks would be introducing parklets along the street parking. Parklets can serve as an extension of business for seating and dining that would also stimulate the local economy. We're also looking at adding awnings on existing buildings, which would help with the activity on the street. And pedestrians want to feel safe and be under the shade, especially here in Florida. And so having destinations that provide this type of pedestrian accommodation will activate the street. And lastly, we're looking at balancing the number of active doors per block throughout the day. And through this, we can make sure there's a diversity of uses throughout the day to keep an active and safe street for all. We can go to the next, thank you. So social dimension and urban vitality is another one of the principles that showcases how, in order to activate these street corridors, there's elements such as urban furniture that's needed. And so during the analysis, we found that some of the storefront owners and visitors were utilizing desk chairs to socialize outside on the sidewalk. And we also find that Main Street has good bones, such as tree planters, safe crosswalk signage, and accessible corner parks. And so these can be enhanced by adding a variety of mobility, such as bike lanes, for easier access to these destinations. And then lastly, adding a series of curb extensions throughout Main Street would help visually and physically narrow the roadway for the pedestrian. And we'll see a series of these examples with some illustrations I'll be showing. And then lastly, the third and final principle would be that of the human scale. And so we see that the existing scale of both streets is adequate in terms of building height to street width, which we saw in the sections that Amelia showcased. But the walkability of the streets lacks consideration of the human scale. And so pedestrians would feel more considered in this planning process by activating the great alleyways that are already existing, also by introducing pedestrian scale shading and lighting, and including pedestrian accommodations at bus stops. We find that some of the stops along both streets don't have seating for people who are waiting for the bus. And so keeping these principles in mind, we move into the proposals and the before and afters of each street. So we start with the section of Main Street looking towards North Howard Avenue. On the right, you can locate yourself on the map. And so behind us, we have North Albany Avenue, and in front of us, we have North Howard Avenue. And here we have the existing conditions of Main Street, which showcases, again, the good bones of the street. We have an adequate amount of sidewalk and existing on-street parking. And then as we can see here, there's a lack of greenery and trees throughout. It seems that palm trees have been more resilient throughout the years and to the weather. And there's also a series of awnings that provide little shading to the pedestrian due to how far these awnings extend to meet the sidewalk. And so this would be the proposal. So we have larger awnings extending to cover the sidewalk zone. We've also added new development on the right that helps enclose and frame the street corridor. And the elements on the street showcase the principle of a complete street by keeping the on-street parking, a dedicated bike lane, and a driving lane on both sides. And so additionally, we have elements that will help activate facades. We have the parklets that I previously discussed for the social dimension of the street. We have street furniture such as benches and pedestrian scale lighting throughout. Oh, can you go back to the... And so lastly, something that we found through our analysis was that the use of trees was not as successful as the use of palm trees. So it seems that the weather and the size of the planters were not adequate enough to keep the liveliness of the trees. So to keep the green areas, a series of pervious strips have been added that can provide infiltration and provide some kind of stormwater management. And so moving on, we have the second section of Main Street. This looks towards North Albany, the North Albany Avenue section. And we have the corner park on the left. And so here we have the existing condition of this intersection. One of the principles we wanted to investigate further was that of the human scale. And so here we have an example of how this part of the street lacks this principle, but has good bones to start with. And so because we have the park on the left that offers an opportunity for social interaction between the visitors and the residents, but we also have a crosswalk that doesn't make this destination very safe. And so we can also see that the existing buildings accommodate for the car. For example, the building on the far left is a liquor store drive-through, and there's no awnings on these existing buildings. And so the proposed version of this includes adding awnings for shading and having new development and programming to support the use of the street. So we have added development on the far left. And that drive-through, that liquor store that used to accommodate the car, would turn into a seating or eating area for the pedestrian that could be shared between building owners. And so moving on to the street elements, we are keeping the on-street parking, but adding that bike lane again. And additionally, the street would house a series of those pervious strips for greenery. Now, at the intersection, we would have a series of curb extensions. They're also called bulb outs that would make the crossing shorter and safer. And so the concept of these bulb outs is that they would also house plants and shrubs that would add to the overall green rhythm of the street. And then lastly, as I've mentioned before, the palm trees. We have these palm trees that could be planted along the edges of the park, and these would serve as a wayfinding element to the park. So as you're approaching the park, you can say, you know, hey, I see the palm trees, we're closer to the park. And these would also enclose the area for a better defined space. And for our final set of sections, we are looking at North Howard Avenue, specifically the blocks where the post office and the Revived Church are located. And so with the existing section, we see that some of the open spaces along Howard are not utilized at all. You can see that on the far left. And some of these facades are not activated because the building is not being used. And so additionally, this parking lot serves the post office and again disrupts the rhythm of the street. We also have some planters that are not being utilized, maybe because the trees were taken out and never replaced. And as far as lighting, there's some existing pedestrian lights, but these lack a rhythm throughout the block. And so throughout the walk audit, we also found that maybe some of these lights have been taken out for maintenance and were never put back in. And so we also see that there's a large amount of space for parking your car and that one-way road. And so the proposed version shows a great change in the roadway. We know that people utilize their bikes to get to and from places. So to keep this option of mobility, we have added a contraflow bike lane on the left. And so this will make it safer for bikers to utilize the street. And there's also a 3 feet buffer for added safety. And we are keeping a one-way lane and adding a dedicated bike lane on the right. And for parking, we've decided to add angled parking, and this will slow down the traffic and make it safer for the pedestrian. As far as the activation of the existing alleyways, which as we saw in the maps and throughout the photographs, North Howard is very rich with these alleyways, and we have activated the unused parking space to the right of this alleyway along with the building facade. And so this space could serve as a multi-purpose space, either be used by the church for activities or even daycare and other events throughout the year. And in addition to this, the alleyways are also activated by street lights, the green strips that I previously talked about, and we have a mid-block crossing aligned to it so that it has a greater connection to the street. And so now we moved on to some proposed perspectives or illustrations. So this is looking at Main Street and North Avenue intersection that I previously talked about. So here we have some of those principles highlighted and they go a little bit more in depth. So we have the active facades. So like I said, most of the existing conditions accommodate the car rather than the pedestrian. And so working in harmony with the social dimension, urban vitality, and the human scale, we can see this zone being converted into pedestrian seating with some street furniture. And this would also activate the frontage zone of the building facades. Moving on to the social dimension and the urban vitality at number 2, to generate a positive use of space and increase that safe interaction between the residents, we include more pedestrian signage and those curb accessions that I previously talked about. Moving on to number 3, we look at the human scale. And so the walkability of Main Street depends on these elements of shading and lighting. And so again, like I mentioned before, the pedestrian would feel more considered in this planning process by having shading and lighting structures to their scale, because as we see, the existing light poles are way out of scale with the pedestrian, but those would be hard to remove. And then moving on to number 4, we look at the green areas. Like I said, the trees that are existing are not maintained well, and some of them don't look very lively, and so these could be replaced with a series of pervious strips that could be maintained to capture and slow down runoff. And so additionally, the introduction of these pervious pavement is applied to the sidewalks, as you can see here, and it enhances the diversity of uses throughout. And lastly, we look at the perspective between North Howard Avenue that houses that post office and the Revived Church. And so looking at number 1, again, we looked at those green areas, but this goes a little bit more in detail as to what the possibilities and the opportunities of that could be. And so again, we can have a series of different greenery throughout. And so we could have a series of shrubs that face the road that can survive the pollution of the cars and the wind. And then on the inside where the pedestrian is walking, we could have a series of more colorful flowers or different greenery that is more delicate. Moving on to number 2, looking at that human scale. And so again, keeping the pedestrian in mind and creating those safer crosswalks. This, for example, is a mid-block crosswalk that creates a very strong connection between both alleyways. And so it would also activate the use of those alleyways. And third, looking at the local identity. And so again, as we've been saying, North Howard has that strong historical character. And a way to enhance this local identity is by encouraging development of local businesses and repurposing of unused parking lots for different activities throughout the day. And like I mentioned, even throughout the year. And these could be shared between the business owners and people around. And then lastly, looking at number 4, again, we look at the diversity of uses. And so promoting the health and the well-being of residents by encouraging physical activity, alternate transportation. Someone can say, hey, you know, I'm not going to take the main street. I'm going to go through the alleyways to get there faster, and there's more shading. And so a way that this can be done is by activating the existing alleyways and extending business activity outside the doors. And so having a series of cafes or small bakeries, outdoor seating, and even community gardens that help compose that alleyway. And that would be it for me. Thank you so much, Amelia.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And then finally, we're gonna go through a final case study where we focused in on a specific block and applied some of the strategies that Anna has talked about and further developed it in order to explain how that would work. So the block that we picked is this one in the intersection of Howard and Main Street. And the reason we did it, it's because it has a central location within the district. It has 2 parks, specifically this South Scenes Park on the corner, which is a great gathering space that houses a lot of the historic character of the district. And this one in the other corner, as well as the proximity to the post office, library, and other mixed-use elements. So here's the current land use, which showcases the potential for commercial improvements, particularly there. And in terms of the framework that we've been talking about, number 1 for us was social participation, was making sure that we involve the community in the design and that we address the needs and are able to maintain what they want. And so going back to those priorities that we mentioned earlier, there's the economic development, the infrastructure, public spaces, and safety. And so that led to determining the next 3 top priorities, which are incentivizing the local economy, the local identity, and improving the diversity of uses and making sure there's a good mix of uses. So in terms of the local economy, there's many ways that physically through urban design we can improve it, and one of them is improving the quality of space, such as those streets around it, that will attract people. It has been agreed by the community that there needs to be more space for new businesses and a good mix of use. Also providing the parking and mobility solutions for people to get to these places, looking into facade renovation programs, but most importantly, encouraging ownership so that the people who own these businesses are able to create jobs and retain jobs for the community. Most of the community agrees that this area does not fulfill their grocery needs or their restaurant needs. And so those are just a few ideas of the types of businesses that could be introduced in addition to what's already there. Here's a look at some of the current conditions, which the historic character of these buildings is great, but the perceived lack of safety has led some of them to take measures such as this one where it encloses the entrance when it's not there. There's a lot of major advantages to this zone, such as the proximity to the city of Tampa and the interstate, the diversity of the customer base, and the synergy that can be found within the types of businesses, as well as the proximity to public housing. However, it doesn't go without some of the challenges that we have to address, such as one of the ones we focused on is the lack of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. And so how can we make design decisions that allow for that to happen so that there's more people coming to this area? So this is what the current plan looks like. And as you can see, there's a lot of empty space devoted to parking lots, as well as these lots that aren't really maximizing on the amount of space that's provided. And so we want to create a space that's more equitable, that people have access to and that can be better maintained and better used, focusing on the concept of community rather than owning your own lot and just worrying about that. It kind of creates additional spaces where the different business owners as well as the residents can work together to improve. So here we've approached this in sort of a phased sense, and it's kind of just an example of what it might look like. And one of the first steps in this particular block that we considered was making Yoselina Street a shared commercial street, and by blocking off this side of it, it would reduce traffic on Main Street, and it would we would relocate the parking over here, and this becomes an extension of the park that can improve the quality of the business next to it. Adding additional buildings and additional density is another option that we can see as the years pass, and it will start to generate these secondary spaces that are activated through the alleyways. So these smaller alleyways start to lead us into the in-between spaces, which will create some relief from that increased density that we might expect in the future, as well as revitalizing the parks and having an improvement in the continuous sidewalks along the Main and Howard. The second priority that we have is looking at the local identity and making sure that those spaces characterize the neighborhood and that people are proud of them. So something that Tampa has been doing is commissioning murals throughout the city, and like Anna said, activating those alleyways is a great opportunity to have even more of this and to bring that colorful and fun community that people want. So here are a few examples of places and what has already been done within West Tampa. The infrastructure initiatives go all the way from improving sidewalk connections, lighting, sustainability, and it would happen in places like this that we could look at into more detail. Here's Yoselina Street currently as it is, and we can see that right now it's very much prioritized and catered towards the car, and that the backside of these buildings is exactly that, it's the backside. However, what would happen if these facades were equally activated and this became a space for pedestrians and visitors? So this is moving on to phase 2, where Yoselina Street becomes completely pedestrian. We provide parking for the incoming density, make sure that those connections on the sidewalk are strong and devoted to the pedestrian, as well as adding the bike lanes that Anna was talking about. So here is an axonometric view of the current conditions. And again, there's all these empty lots and misused space. As we move on to the first phase that I was just talking about, there's the possibility of having these exterior outdoor seatings like the ones mentioned, the activation of the alleyways, and the rethinking of the way that the street is working, like Anna mentioned, all those green buffers, parklets, and so on. And then here in phase 3, and I do want to mention that these buildings that we've placed here really are just placeholders as an idea of the future, and it doesn't, because what we don't want is buildings that don't reflect the character of West Tampa, but right now they're just to showcase what that density could become and how they're starting to create those semi-public spaces that are really belonging to the community, while at the same time activating Main Street for its visitors. All of these through those alleyways. And finally, diversity of uses, which comes from those new buildings by blending residential, office, and commercial areas, providing all those needs and wants that the community requires, as well as providing more options of housing for those that live in the community and who want to continue living there. So we have some perspectives of how this might happen. So again, this is Yoselina Street looking at Main. And this would be in phase 1. So using these urban design elements, starting to occupy the street and redirecting cars onto the other side. And this is phase 2. And as you see, it's much more catered to all these open spaces, to people, to gathering, and proposing buildings like the one you see in the back, where the bottom level is commercial and then people can live at the top. And this ensures that there's constantly activity on the street, which ensures safety. This is also Yoselina Street looking at the parking lot. In phase 1, that parking lot becomes more organized, more greenery, and in phase 2, it through the lighting and through the framing of those spaces, it provides more public space. We have a few views in axonometric as well, and these will be up so that people can look at them, the current conditions. This is Howard Street, and again, one of the issues that we found is that there's a lack of rhythm throughout the street due to all the empty parking lots. So we think that by adding a little bit more density would start to frame that street and create a better relationship between the ratio of width to height of that street. Here are some sections of what that might look like on Howard. And again, another perspective of Yoselina Street. An axonometric where we're showing those secondary spaces and the activation of the street, and obviously including all those elements of lighting that Anna talked about, the type of architecture that might be presented, and the greenery through those trees, the activation of the alleyways and lighting at the human scale. And that is what we have today. But thank you so much for your time and for listening. And if there are any questions or any comments, we'd be glad to talk about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. Thanks, Anna. Randy, we will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Darren. And I want to thank the USF students, Amelia and Anna, for presenting. This is just one of the teams that is looking at the Main Street. And this presentation, as I mentioned, is going to be posted in the next week or so. We're also going to be having presentations internally for all of the teams, for both Main Street, and also we're doing a similar exercise on Palmacia, the Palmacia district. And all of those presentations will be placed on our website over the next 2 to 3 weeks, so the community can see what the other teams have recommended for Main Street. It'll also give you an opportunity to give us your preference on what direction, what area, what things you like, which ones you preferred over others, so that when we create the final plan, we'll hopefully choose a theme that fits into the preferences of the community. We do have, we can try this if there are some individuals that want to comment audibly. We can, I think, go ahead and try to record your comments. Just raise your hand digitally so we know so at least I know where you're at, and then we can maybe try to get you on audio. Just state your name so that the recording can pick up who you are.
I'm sorry, hello?
Yeah, Michael Randolph.
Yes, this is Mike Randolph. First, I want to say I'm very, very impressed. Great job. I was coming here thinking I would have all kind of questions. Great job. I want to commend the students for a job well done. I'm specifically want to give a shout out to Randy, to you and your team that emphasized the importance of making sure showing that African Americans, especially those businesses, are given a priority. That's very, very important. So I can tell you right now, based on that, you've definitely got the community behind your back in terms of them knowing that really this process also includes them. Now, I do want to talk about transit real quick because you know in West Tampa, there's only one bus that comes to West Tampa. Yet we know that within 10 miles of West Tampa, you got about 1 million people. You got City Hall, you got the airport. The question is, how do we begin to increase the number of buses that's coming to West Tampa in order to increase the number of dollars that's going to our businesses? Again, we need more than one transit bus. We just need more than one transit bus. And I believe that one of the reasons why businesses are down on Main Street, because they took that bus off, that number 7 off of that particular route. So that being said, thank you very much. I'm very impressed, and I'm looking forward to Main Street, the next chapter.
Thanks, Michael. Those are good comments. This is Michael Abraham.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little low, but I think if you can get maybe closer to your mic.
Okay, I'll do my best. Is that any better?
Yeah, better.
Okay, thank you. This is really great news and really wonderful for the neighborhood. I moved here when In Town Homes was building the homes. I think I was one of the last houses built during that time and have been here since 2009. And it's exciting to see how everything's coming along. You know, including the African American community, I'm also part Latino as well as Middle Eastern, and there's a lot of different groups of people that live in this neighborhood. And it would be great to really have that inclusivity that you're talking about to make it that real urban feel. And I think that it's exciting to see what's coming so that the community can all come together and enjoy the neighborhood together and really make it a great place to live. A couple of things that I wanted to ask for on my wish list. I came here from California, lived in a very walkable neighborhood. I understand that there's a Publix that's going to be built, if I'm not mistaken, close by. And then also it'd be great to have a dry cleaner that we could walk to, as well as like a really cool cafe, you know, that we might go to on Sunday morning just to hang out and read the paper. And those are just a couple of ideas that I have. I'm real excited about the neighborhoods being cleaned up. I see Main Street totally dilapidated, and I wish I had a ton of money to pump into it. I don't, but man, there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that to make it that real urban feel, you know, to include, you know, those that are economically challenged as well as middle class, and then potentially high-end living. So it truly is an urban feel with a good mix of all different kinds of people. So I'm just happy to be here and really excited to see what happens. And my question for you is, when are you guys planning on rolling this out and starting the construction process?
Thanks, Michael. We're targeting the completion of the plan April, May, to really put together the plan, and then the actual implementation construction hopefully will follow shortly after. It becomes a funding issue, so hopefully the funds can be found and parts of it can start shortly thereafter. Kevin Johnson. I'm having trouble unmuting you. There we go. Try it again. I think I'm muting you when you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Kevin Johnson, born and raised in Tampa, background in urban design and urban development. Presentation by the students was amazing. You guys provided some pretty good information in terms of walkability, just general urban design terms and knowledge. So I think that was great. But I think, as everyone's kind of said, I think one of the biggest things is just maintaining and being vocal and intentional about maintaining the cultural diversity in the area. As I think Michael said it. As Michael said, it's not all Black people. Old West Tampa, it has a lot of Black history, but West Tampa in general has a lot of Latin, a lot of Italian culture. So, but I think the Main Street corridor can really be a celebration of the influx and the diversity of culture in Tampa. I don't think there's a place like that in Tampa. I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of make this that. Things are being swallowed up, as eyes start to kind of focus in on Tampa. And I just think that the city can, if the city is vocal about, maintaining that culture and that history and that richness that is West Tampa, I think everybody will get behind it. And I think we can, as I told Frank Hall the other day, I think we can serve as an example to the rest of the country, especially, with everything that's going on right now. I think we can serve as an example to the rest of the country that, we can retain and redevelop and revitalize some of our ethnic communities. So I think that's the biggest thing, man. I think everything else will fall into place, but I think the biggest thing and that will keep everybody happy is just maintaining the culture and respecting the culture and giving it a platform.
Okay, thank you very much. Is this Ellie? Ellie Taliant? I think you just have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Ellie Talent. I've been living in the neighborhood for several years now. One of the things that I would like to suggest, and I have another question too, but a community garden. I know there was a lot of talk about green space and things like that. I think if there is a way for the community to come together and get to know each other in a constructive way, and a community garden where food is provided, as this is a food desert. I know, or I've heard Publix again is coming in, but again, I think having access to a public garden and all that goes along with that would be great for this community. And my question is, how do I get involved with this? I think a couple people had asked, when is this being rolled out and what is the timeline of this? But if we're having these initial planning meetings, how does one resident, be more of an impact than watching a webinar on other people's ideas, which I think are fantastic. But I myself would like to have a hand in how this happens and having a clear direction of what you all need in the residence. I think would be even more impactful and beneficial to make this our community and develop it as a community together.
Those are good questions, Ellie. And I think the best approach for anybody that still wants to be more involved and provide ideas or suggestions, we'll continue to receive those. Frank Hall, our project manager, is available to speak with anybody. We'll also be able to continue to provide ways to people that can contact us through our website, either where they could just provide an email for an idea, or if they want to speak with us. But we'll be willing to hear ideas from individuals as well as organization and property owners for at least the next month, maybe through the end of January. At some point in time, we have to roll up our sleeves and pull everything together. But for the next few weeks, we'll be more than willing and happy to hear ideas. Michael Bracchia.
Hey, Randy, how you doing? Mike Brascia with Bay Street Commercial, and also a property owner on Main Street. And great presentation by USF. Obviously, a lot of emphasis on the walkability and enjoying of the outside space. I mean, it was the West Tampa was sort of developed before everybody owned a car, so it was intended for people to be to be a very pedestrian environment. To bring that back, we have to have a reason for people to be on the streets and to enjoy the neighborhood, outdoors and walking through the neighborhood. Those outdoor spaces and those awnings, which are actually prescribed in certain areas along the pedestrian corridors within West Tampa, and especially on Main Street, it's going to be important that people have a reason to be outside sitting down. And people, they have mentioned the problem with homelessness and things like that. As we create these outdoor spaces, we want to make sure they're being used for the proper uses and being covered area for people to be able to eat outside and so forth. An impact that I know Randy and I have discussed in the past of the fact that those things are encroaching on those right of ways is that it is very, very difficult to get those awning permits through with all of the varying departments. And I know they're working on kind of streamlining that process, but the facade grants that are available through the CRA, it's a perfect opportunity for those to go towards some of these awning and kind of creating these outside, these outside areas and adding to that pedestrian environment. So, as we have other restaurants kind of popping in and we have wide sidewalks and we're going to make that allowable, we just need to make sure that the vision is attainable based on the limitations that we might have from a regulatory standpoint. So, if it's a, food being served outside is now more and more necessary with COVID, and leaving enough room for pedestrian walkway past tables and so forth. We just really need a clear outline, because if that's the vision, we just need to make sure that we can actually achieve it. So I see a lot of people that are interested in doing that, but then they get down the road a little bit and it seems that it's going to be very, very difficult. So I hope that we talk a little bit more in the future about how we accommodate those businesses that are hoping to come in and achieve that pedestrian environment that everybody wants in West Tampa. So.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any other questions? Okay, this would conclude our presentation for tonight. Where we go from here, as I mentioned, we'll be placing this webinar on our website for others that want to view it. We're going to be working with the USF students, the rest of the students, to get their presentations recorded and placed on our website. We'll be following up with those of you to invite your insights into the students' presentations. Give us your feedback, which ones you like, what elements you liked, and help us guide us visually in terms of selecting some of the elements that you'd like to see in the district. And then we'll be back, I think, another meeting after the first of the year. It'll probably be later in January as we celebrate the holidays and start pulling this information together. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our project manager. His name, again, is Frank Hall. His email address is frank.hall@tampagov.net. That's frank.hall@tampagov.net. He'll be more than happy to answer any questions or keep you in the loop as the project moves forward. Again, everybody, I want to thank you for joining us. And I want to especially thank Anna and Amelia for the work that they provided on this, and also the presentation for tonight. You all have a great holiday season, everyone.
Have a good evening. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you to everyone in the community for being with us.